Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I have the honor of introducing our speaker for today. So we have Lisia Sadler.
Good morning.
She is the Senior Technical Design Manager for Land's End with more than 30 years of experience in apparel product development, quality assurance, and leadership. Along with this corporate career, she also is an entrepreneur and launched a bridal brand called Francesca Kaleen, which debuted in New York Fashion Week. I'm so grateful that she was willing to drive all the way from Wisconsin to come and speak with us today. So can we please welcome Lisia Sadler.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here today. And before I start, I would like to offer a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask that everything that is said in this room this morning will be enlightening to someone, encouraging to someone, and that they will learn something about product development, and that you'll be with me as I am not a speaker, but this is my first time, and so that I ask that you just have your will and have your way, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
So my name is Lisia Sadler. In my everyday life, everyone calls me Lisia. If I'm designing something for you, out of my own business, I go by my first name, Franca. Hence why I use all three of my names. This is kind of a little bit of what I look like during the day at work. So there are truths about fashion and myths about fashion. The runways, designers, glamour, trends. And I'm gonna play a little video for you. Which one? Okay, let's see. And those are the myths of fashion. That's what you see front facing the customer in Paris, Milan, Japan, Tokyo. But then you have the real world of fashion, the corporate side of it, and what I do on a day-to-day basis with my cross-functional teams. We have development, sample development, production, buying and assortment, distribution, email, trend analysis. We're engineering, we're managing global supply chains, cost management, risk mitigation, and cross-functional leadership. That's what fashion looks like on an everyday basis. And it doesn't matter if you've gone to school to be an actual fashion designer or if you're in finance. A conversation I had with Ellie is what kind of started this whole point of me being here today. She was telling me that she liked finance and she loved fashion. And I just relayed to her that a lot of that information that you get in finance is used in fashion every day. Buyers are always doing cost analysis. Sourcing managers are always getting quotes from vendors and pricing garments and pricing how much it's going to cost to get a garment onto a ship and then overseas via plane. All of those things are things that I have to deal with on an everyday basis in my job as a technical designer. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into the industry. I have a bachelor's of fine arts in fashion design. I started my internship as a pattern maker and marker maker at a very, very small company in Florida called Can Do Fashions. At that company, they made sleepwear and some activewear. My first collection that I did for them was a sleepwear collection with a company called Coldwater Creek. Have any of you ever heard that name? Aha, you're telling on yourself. Coldwater Creek is an old company. I don't even think it's in existence anymore. But my first collection was a plaid robe, plaid pant, and nightshirt that was in Coldwater Creek catalog back in the early 90s. I'm telling a little bit about myself now. My first role after leaving that internship, which turned into a job because the lady that was supposed to be teaching me up and left 2 weeks after I started and took a job at a company called Cato Fashions in North Carolina. So I was left as a student knowing nothing, running a small pattern design room, and the owner of the company decided to make me the manager, a student. It was an undertaking, to say the least. I would get up, get into the office 6 o'clock in the morning. I had 2 manuals that were about this thick because things were starting to go digital, but I hadn't even had digital pattern making classes in my course of study yet because that was just coming out, telling a little bit more about myself. I would go into the office and I would read those manuals and learn what I needed to learn from those manuals during the day so that by 9 o'clock when my boss came in, who didn't know anything about fashion either, the company was actually her husband's company, but he was indisposed, I won't go into that, and she was running a company that prenup-wise she should not have been running. And so I was her right hand. So I'm learning how to make markers. Markers was the way of, it's like a puzzle. You're putting all of the pattern pieces onto fabric to make sure that they fit at a highest rate possible so that you're not wasting fabric. Another costing thing, another part of the fashion industry where finance and the business of it goes together. I was also managing the sample making sure that the samples were going through the design room at a rate that gave us time to get them to the vendors overseas to actually make the goods. There was always a first sample that was made in-house after I made a pattern, and then that pattern went overseas after we tested everything in the pattern making room. After leaving that job, after graduation, I got my first job at Home Shopping Network. How many of you have heard of Home Shopping Network? Ah, we're telling on ourselves in the back again. So Home Shopping Network is a shopping channel. A lot of people that like to just watch TV and buy things from television instead of, online. That was like the first way of kind of online shopping was via television. And so I got my first job at Home Shopping as a quality assurance technician. And this was the nitty-gritty behind the scenes. You're doing burn testing, wash testing, pill testing, all the things that people would think are boring about fashion, but help you to get a garment that lasts long, doesn't blow up every time you stand over the stove cooking because it catches on fire. We had things that we were looking at in children's clothing that are made a certain way so that they don't have choking hazards. And so those are the tests that I was running on a daily basis. We had ISO standards, which are, let me look at my notes for a moment. International Organization for Standardization. And so that is a list of stitches that are given a number because we're working with a lot of manufacturers overseas that don't speak English as their first language. And so those numbers told them you need to use this machine at this side seam for this many stitch lengths for this amount of stitches in the garment. And then we had the ASTM testing, which was something else that I worked on, and I'm gonna go to those slides. So these are some of the stitches. These are not all the stitches, there are hundreds of these codes and stitches, and then a description showing what the stitch should do. So when you're wearing a hoodie, you're going to probably see this stitch in it a lot. When you're wearing denim jeans, you'll see this on the back of a denim jean that has a stretch to it. And all of those stitches mean something and go into specific types of garments. And so that's where the engineering part of what I do in fashion comes in. The designer hands off to me just a plain sketch, and I have to take that sketch and make it come to life. Another piece of quality assurance that I was involved in was ASTM testing, American Society for Testing and Materials. We would do a lot of burn testing. Sometimes vendors would send us fabric and they say, oh yeah, it's 100% silk. And we would take it into the lab and we would burn it. And we were like, oh no, this is polyester. That looks like silk because it smells a certain way, it burns a certain way. And you can tell, okay, you're giving me a price for this, but you're actually shipping this fabrication to me. Please give me what I'm actually paying for, or let's negotiate the price for what you've actually made the garment out of. Anyone recognize this slide? This is an ASTM guide. It's a care symbol. It tells you how to care for your garment, how to wash it, what temperature to wash it in. Is it hand wash? Is it machine wash? What temperature to wash it in? Should you use bleach? Should you not use bleach? Should you dry it? What temperature to dry it on? If it's hang to dry, line dry, drip dry, dry flat, all of these symbols mean something. You have your iron, cool iron, medium iron, warm iron, no iron, or dry clean. And so these were testings that I did for Home Shopping Network in the first 5.5 years as my job as a quality assurance technician. I was in the lab day in and day out, testing garments in the machines, in the dryers, hanging to dry, burning garments. A lot goes into that nice white shirt that you're wearing right now. All of that is done before you get it. So this is just some of what the lab looks like. This is a pill test. And so you've probably noticed that you might buy a hoodie or a t-shirt, and after wearing it a few times, it gets all these little knots and lumps. That happens because you have a natural fiber and a synthetic fiber woven into one garment, and they're fighting each other and rubbing against each other, and they create this pill. Usually, if you have a 100% cotton t-shirt, you will not see this. If you have a cotton and polyester t-shirt, you will see this happen. If you have a polyester t-shirt, you'll see that happen. You'll see some burn test fabrics on the side there. It's been so many years since I've done burn testing. I definitely remember what wool is supposed to burn like and what silk is supposed to burn like, but there was a time when I could test rayon, nylon, and a host of other fabrics and smell them and look at them and visibly remember what they should look like after testing them. So some more of the less exciting parts of fashion were factory audits, HR, payroll, health and safety, production process, documentation and records. We want to make sure as companies like Land's End, Home Shopping, J. Crew, any company that you work for in the US, they are pretty much making their garments overseas. And we want to make sure that we're working with factories and with vendors that are actually paying their people and paying them a fair wage. There's a lot of slave labor, believe it or not, in the industry, and we don't want to be a part of that. And so that's why we look at their HR and payroll, time and salary payment. We want to make sure that they are in healthy and safe environments. If you're sewing on a machine, like I have, and I only did this once or twice in my life, you're sewing and oops, your finger gets sewn and the needle goes in, and now you've got to pull your hand out, pull the needle out. We want to make sure that the people that are doing that are in an environment where they can get the care that they need immediately and get good care. We want to make sure that they are inspecting their fabric properly, that they're check by checks for each production stage, looking for defects in fabric, because we don't want that you pay $80 for whatever it is you're paying for and you get it home and now there's a hole in the side seam because the needle was shredded and punched through the fabric in a way that it should not have. So those are some of the other things that I did. We had social audits where we evaluate factories and working conditions. Those were more focused audits. Technical audits, making sure that garments that we assigned to certain factories, they were actually factories that were set up to make those sort of garments. And then compliance audits where, they're following all of the legal requirements for their area. Different countries have different compliances that different factories have to work through. So that's just a little bit of my career as a quality assurance technician. So the funny thing about being a college student and getting your first job offer, when I got my first job offer, I had never made the money that I was being offered, and I thought, wow, I'm gonna be rich. Little did I know that at Home Shopping Network, I was doing 2 jobs for half the pay of one of those jobs. And I did that for 5.5 years because I didn't do my research. I didn't know at that age that I could negotiate a salary. I had never been taught that at home or in class. And at that time, we didn't have Glassdoor where you could go on and Google and look at employees' salaries and see what companies were paying people at different positions. That wasn't around when I first got out of school. So I was, making the money I was making, and I thought I was doing good until I started to hear the term technical design, which was not a term that I had heard in school. And the reason that was happening was because the industry was starting to change. A lot of companies were leaving the US and were sending their design houses overseas to China, to Vietnam, to India, Pakistan, Mexico, wherever. And a lot of that is stemming from the American people wanting to pay less and less and less for things and get more and more and more for things. Hence, we now have this whole tariff thing going on, but I digress. So jobs were leaving the US and going overseas. And so all of these pattern makers and engineers that had been in the industry in LA and in New York and Chicago were losing their jobs. And now everything was in China and all of these other countries. But they didn't understand the American body. If you look at people demographically all over the world, we're very different heights, shapes, sizes. And so they were making patterns for us in China, and they were not fitting the way the American customer is used to fitting their clothing. And so some of that, how can I say this? Some of the communication was getting broken down, and people were losing money that had sent all of their business over to overseas factories. So they decided to rehire the pattern makers back. And now instead of calling them pattern makers, they were working as technical designers. So they were still engineering and using those pattern skills, but they were communicating all of those changes that were needed to the garment and to the patterns and fabrication and whatever to the factories overseas. So now there became a collaboration between your vendors overseas and then your in-house or design houses in New York and LA. And that's how I kind of fell into a technical design role. I was actually doing the job at Home Shopping. I was doing quality assurance work, but I was also fitting garments, writing specifications, looking at grade rules, making grade rules, and sending those communications back and forth to the vendors. What is a grade rule? Does anyone know what a grade rule is? I will break it down and make it really simple. Has your parent ever bought a set of bowls that nested inside each other? Those nesting of those bowls had grade rules. Basically, it said the small bowl is this diameter, the next bowl is this diameter, the next bowl is this diameter. The same thing happens with your clothing. When you have a size small, you have your base size, and then you grade up. Different points of measurement grade different ways so that the person who is 6'5" gets what they need, and the person who is 5'3", like me, gets what they need. That's part of grading. And every single portion of the garment that you're wearing is graded. So I was doing all of that at HSN and not getting paid for it because I was a quality assurance technician and I was getting paid what I was getting paid for that, but none of the technical design work. So I found out about a company called Bell's in Florida. They were a department store. They're very similar to Kohl's. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bell's. And so I went over to Bell's and I became a technical designer, a whole new term I had never heard about. And I learned how to do that job basically on the job, taking what I had done at Home Shopping Network and then doing more research. I learned to do research now. I did make a really big mistake at Bell's though, and that's why being transparent when you don't know something is important. I had never worked on children's clothing before as far as grading. I had worked on Missy's Petite Plus for women. I'd never worked on men's clothing before. And so at Bell's, I was in charge of all the children's clothing. So from the tiny, teeny babies to the kids growing up and everyone in between, including men's. And I told them that. I said, I've only worked on women's clothing. I know women's clothing, Missy's, Petites, Plus, Juniors. I can do all of that. I don't know anything about kids. So because I was not a parent, because I think if I had been a mom, I would have known that I couldn't grade a child's pant the same way I graded an adult woman's pant. And so therefore we had a style that I graded like a woman's pant. We lost quite a bit of money, but because I was truthful with what I knew and didn't know, they soaked it up. Big mistake, huge learning curve. I think I ran to a store called, what was one of these children's stores? Can't think of the name right now, but I bought a whole stack of kids' pants. And I learned how to measure those pants, and I went into our system and changed all the grade rules for the kids' pants. And I learned a big lesson in grading children's clothing. That was a lot of fun. Embarrassing, but being truthful helped to save my face and, you know, not let my boss fire me because I had lost quite a bit of money for the company. But, you know, that's all part of the growing pains of being in the industry. So what I want to show you now is what goes into my technical design package. And I could not show you anything I'm doing at Land's End currently for proprietary reasons, but this sheet here is a base spec sheet. It has all the base measurements of the garment and your front and back sketch, And then you have what is called a BOM, or a bill of materials. It has every single component that goes into the garment: your buttons, your trims, your threads, your interlinings, your linings, your fabrication, elastics, anything that was taken to make your garment goes in that. And then you have your technical sketch, which shows the inside and outside of the garment. And sometimes, I worked for a company called Carhartt once. Has anyone heard of that company? I know all the guys probably have. Some of you probably have worn some of the stuff I worked on. There's a lot of stuff in Carhartt garments that go on in between the lining and the jacket that you never see. There's a ton of engineering in there, especially for jackets that are in construction and more labor-driven work, where men are swinging hammers or jackhammers. There are things that we do to the inside of those garments, all of the engineering, that help those garments to function the way the men that are working in them want them to function. And so that goes on a sheet like that over there. And then this is your graded measurement sheet. I've been talking about that a lot, showing how your chest is grading, your bicep is grading. This is all the technical and engineering part of what goes into making your clothing. And that is what I manage. I'm the person that takes this and interprets it into all of this, so that the manufacturer overseas knows exactly what to do with the garment to make it. So in my world as a technical designer, I'm not just kind of like this doing my own thing, unfortunately. It's a big ship to run sometimes. I'm working with a designer, a merchant, a sourcing manager or product development manager, and I'm working with a vendor. And I have to please all of those people. In a role as a technical designer, I cannot think of a time that I ever interviewed for a technical design role that I did not meet with at least 4 to 8 people on a small scale. Because I have to meet with each of these teams, and each of these teams has to feel comfortable working with me and collaborating with me. So as a TD, you are leading the fit, the engineering of the garment, the fabric, not necessarily the cost, but you're influencing the cost. You can make a garment very, very expensively or very cheaply, and you have to make it in a way so that it fits the budget for the company that you're working for. Every company has a budget. You have Walmart budget, you have Land's End budget, you have a budget for Vince Camuto, and you have to engineer according to those budgets. And you have to know what the engineering looks like for each of those classes of garments. And so I'm pleasing the merchant by engineering so that it meets her cost. I'm pleasing the sourcing manager by engineering so that she or he can put it into a factory that can make it for that cost. I'm pleasing the designer because I have to engineer it and keep it aesthetic to what they sketched. And I'm engineering to make sure that the vendor has the exact machines to make those garments. The role that we do is extremely cross-functional. You have to kind of know a little bit of all of these people's jobs and your own very well in order to do a good job. That's me, but that's AI me. I took a picture and I took a picture of my face and they gave me this little sketch here. So this is me looking at a 3D model. Engineering has changed so much since I got into the industry. Everything was manual when I started off. I had my paper patterns and I was moving everything manual. Now everything is done on a screen like this. And it makes it easier in some ways, but you know, technology is as good as the person utilizing it, and technology is also as good as the person who programmed it too. So there are hiccups and flaws sometimes, and we have to work through those. There are different programs like Clo, Optitex, 3D digital programs that are helping us to be more nimble and move faster in the industry and be more sustainable. Instead of having all of these samples back and forth, sometimes we do digital ones so that we're not wasting all of these materials that end up in landfills. That is something that has become very, very important to different companies, is the waste of materials that we utilize to make garments. So just to give a little bit more, your merchandiser owns the financial performance, margins and assortment strategy. Your designer creates concepts, does trend analysis and forecasting, color forecasting, and then you have your product development manager who is executing the timelines, cut dates, cut date, cut date. If you miss a cut date and you have to air goods in, you've lost money. That is important. If I am having a difficult time working with a vendor that is not making the corrections that I need them to make to a pattern or to a fit or to the balance of a garment, and they're getting close to their cut date, I have to then decide, okay, I don't like how this looks, but this guy here in this nice powder blue tie, he's not gonna know that I didn't fix the armhole correctly. He's just gonna throw his shirt on and he's gonna be like, this brand is okay, maybe I won't buy it again, but it only cost me 29 bucks. Maybe I will buy it again. And so I've given the customer something that I didn't think was perfection, but he thinks it's okay for what he paid for it. And then I can go behind the scenes and tweak it a little bit more for next season. That way I keep my cut date and I ship it in instead of air it in. All of those little things are playing behind the scenes. You have your sourcing manager. They're looking for the right factory for the garment and the right costing for the garment so that they can please the merchant. You have supply chain and logistics, inventory and distribution, and then me, product integrity, product engineering, and making sure that you can actually make it. I've had designers give me a sketch, and I'm like, how is the person getting into this garment? Is there a zipper? Are there buttons? Is it stretch? Oh, can you please fix this so that I know what I'm engineering? So That's, those are some of the fun things. So, leadership evolution, managing people versus managing product, coaching, influencing without authority, conflict resolution, and protecting brand standards. I'm going to talk about all of this in a story. So, when I was, looking at my time, when I was in Philadelphia, I worked for a company called Destination Maternity. Has anyone heard of Destination Maternity? Has anyone heard of Mother's Work? Good. None of you ladies in here should have, because you're in school and you should not be having babies yet. Destination Maternity, Oh Baby, Mother's Work is the premier, I would say, world maternity company. They are focused primarily on maternity wear. And I was working for them in Philadelphia, and I liked working for them. But one of the luxuries of working in the fashion industry is sample sales. We get some really, really, really nice stuff, really, really, really cheap or for free. And I didn't have kids. I was not planning on being pregnant for the rest of my life. And so sample sales at Destination Maternity were kind of, I don't want any of this stuff. So I was taking my husband Roy to an off-site where he was working one day because his car was in the shop. And on my drive there, I see QVC Studios. Has anyone ever heard of QVC? You should have. They were the competitor of Home Shopping Network, the other television shopping channel. So Home Shopping Network was very fashion oriented, and QVC was known mainly for electronics and home goods and that sort of thing. Funny thing is, they merged about 8 years ago, and now HSN's campus is gone, and QVC that sent all their employees to HSN like 8 years ago, everyone's back in Philly. But I digress. That's things that happen in the industry. So I'm driving, I see QVC Studios, and I'm like, what? Because I was in Florida working at HSN, and I knew about QVC, but I never knew where they were, didn't really care because I was at HSN. So I drove into the parking lot. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where they are. They're in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And we lived about 35 minutes from where they were. So I thought, let me see if they have any openings. So I went online, and they had a role for a technical designer. I interviewed for that job, and it was intense. I cannot tell you how many people I met for that role. And the day that they decided to make me an offer, the lady who was going to be my boss showed me a stack of resumes like this, about 5 inches thick. And she said, we went through all these resumes to get to you. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And she said, the role and the place we're going to put you in, no one internally wanted it. And I'm thinking, okay. And so she says, have you heard of Isaac Mizrahi? And I said, yes. I know him from Project Runway. I've seen his stuff at Dillard's and Macy's, and he even had a little small capsule at Target. I know exactly who he is. And so she says, he has a line here. We have a 5-year contract with him, and it's failing, and we're 2 years in. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's why this posting was out there for so long and not filled. So no pressure. I'm thinking, okay. So I get into the job role, and I'm realizing that this is a very visible brand that I'm in right now. There were so many microscopes on what was happening with Isaac's brand, and it was bad. I remember going into a fit one day, and there was a dress that was like a knit t-shirt top with a little purple tutu. And I was like, what is this? What is the aesthetic? Because I've seen his stuff at Dillard's, I've seen his stuff at Macy's, and it doesn't look like this. What are we designing? And I talked to his team, and they said, we're designing, but we don't understand what QVC wants from us. QVC catered to older women, 40-something to 60-something. Isaac Mizrahi was a very youthful, colorful, vibrant brand. And There were a lot of things about his brand that did not fit into the QVC mold. But I did something that I do when I go to every job, and I always pray, Lord, please, whatever I touch here at this company, increase it, enlarge it, bless it. And so I started to have to lead. The role I was in should really have been a role for a senior technical designer. And at that point of my career, I was a technical designer. I had been just promoted into that role. So I started making changes. I learned my lesson. I started researching. I researched. Went and shopped the market, shopped what other customers that liked Isaac's brand shopped for. And I came back to my merchant and I said, we need to do numerical sizing for our bottoms. And she says, we don't do that at QVC. And I said, we have to for Isaac's brand. And that is not a lane that I should be in as a technical designer. You don't tell your merchant how to size their garments. They tell you what they want and then you make it. And so she says, we don't do that. Our women like pull-on, stretch, elastic waist pants. That's what we sell here. And I said, the customer that wants Isaac's stuff does not want pull-on elastic waist. She wants flat front, maybe some elastic in the back. And you may think that those nuances are not that big a deal, but they are a huge deal when you're talking about a brand that's millions and millions of dollars. So I convinced her that we needed to do 00 to size 28 instead of extra small to 3X or 5X. Huge change. It meant more SKUs because now instead of fitting 2 sizes in one, you're fitting 1 size and each size has to fit perfectly every time somebody puts it on for people that look very different heights, torsos, lengths, and everything. I did so much grading until I didn't want to grade anymore. Measuring, grading, doing all of the math to figure out what is the best perfection point for each garment so that when someone 5'3" puts this on and someone 5'6" puts this on, they both feel really good in it. Long story short, I wanted to start with bottoms because I figured if we could do something different in bottoms, we could really boost his business, and it paid off. The first season, I increased Isaac's business by 18%. The next season by 28%. The next season by 33%. I was given a presidential award and key team player award by Doug Howe. He's a very well-known known name in the apparel industry. And I could not believe that I was able to do that. But that was because I chose to lead without influence and without authority. I guess I was influential. I got them to do things that they had not done. So I was influential, but I did not have the authority to do that. I was not a senior technical designer. I was a technical designer. I wasn't even a director or a VP. Those are decisions that were made at higher roles. But because I believed what I believed, and I believed that because the Holy Spirit told me to believe that. And when you trust in God and you ask Him to bless what you're working on, He will bless it. And I stand firm on that. So I helped to protect the brand standard, Isaac's brand. I brought it into the influence of the QVC brand, and his customers could not stop singing the praises of Isaac. Oh, Isaac has the best fit. Isaac has done such a wonderful job. Isaac this, Isaac that. I'm like, what about me? But that's what happens as a technical designer. You're behind the scenes, you're doing all the work, and someone else is getting all the glory. It's the same thing when you're working corporately. I'm working with a designer now at Land's End, and I mean, internally I get all the glory, but the customers are giving the designer all the fame because they don't know about me. Most customers have never heard of a technical designer. They know about the designer, but the technical designer, the engineer, is the person that makes it happen. So things have changed a lot in my industry in the last 30 years. I remember when I used to fax my fit reports, and I would fax and fax and fax, and my lying vendors would say, we didn't get it. And they're saying that because they know they're running late. And if they can say that I didn't send something or we didn't get it, but they can't do that anymore because we went to email and we're like, you did get it. I see that you got it, because we have email now. Manual hard patterns, everything was just manual, manually created Excel-based spreadsheets, hand-drawn points of measurement. Everything is done digitally now. My 3D avatars, patterns, the globalization of manufacturing, the rise in product of PLM systems that manage everything that's happening with the garment. We used to have so much paperwork that was disjointed back in the, I won't say back in the when. 3D and AI tools, sustainability expectations. You know, people are angry about landfills, and rightly so. So instead of sending physical samples, we do this now, and it saves a lot of money, it saves a lot of time, and hopefully it'll help to decrease landfills. We can work remotely now, thank God. I have a 37-minute drive to my job every day, and I think if I had to do that every single day of the week and every week of the month, that I would definitely burn out. So it's nice to be able to work from home on Friday where I cook my veggie meat in the kitchen and get my Sabbath dinner ready. So, and I work from home 1 week a month, and any week from the month that has a holiday, so it's a good thing. So if there are any of you that want lands and internships in business and things like that, let me know. I'll try to connect you with our HR people. So skills that matter most: communication, analytical thinking, technical literacy, financial understanding, emotional intelligence, resilience. Resilience, resilience, resilience. You can burn out very quickly in the apparel industry doing the job that I do, and also the job that designers do, because you have to be up on your game all the time. I don't know if any of you have ever watched Project Runway with Heidi Klum, where she says, 1 minute you're in, the next minute you're out. It's exactly like that. It can be, if you're not solid in your job, if you're not creative, and if you're not connected. But I have a connection, so yeah. How to break into the industry: internships, entry level, questions and answers, assistant roles, vendor side experience, cross-functional curiosity, working with other people that, you know, do the job that you want to do. The lessons I've learned over the last 30 years: master the fundamentals early. Don't chase titles, build your capabilities. Say yes to stretch assignments. That stretch assignment with Isaac was a huge stretch for me. It was maybe at 2 levels to where I should be, but I did the work and I was rewarded for it. Relationships matter. Do not burn bridges. If you don't like somebody you're working with, don't let them know that. Don't let them know. Be kind, be courteous, be Christ-like. Integrity builds credibility. The fashion is a business of leadership. Every garment represents collaboration across engineering, finance, sourcing, and design. And if you understand business and you understand people, you can lead in this industry. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
How do you manage expectations and set vision, like you mentioned, for all the 5 departments that you work with?
Well, like I was telling you before, I've learned to research. So let's say, here's a way I've managed expectations recently. I just had my designer, my head designer who works in the New York office, hand off a drop shoulder boat neck shirt to me. Our current Lands' End customer, who is an older lady, she doesn't understand oversized garments or drop shoulders. And when we've sold them in the past, she's kind of pushed back and said, I don't want that. And so she doesn't buy it. So he was giving me a drop shoulder that was like 30 inches. And 21 inches, thinking of a different top. That was a sleep top. This top was 21 inches. And I said, Jackie, if we do this, she's not gonna buy it. And if we're trying to get her daughter to be our customer and keep her as a customer, let's go 19 inches. Let's bring the chest in so that it looks like what's on the runway, but she understands it more. We get her daughter, who's like, I wish this was a little bit more dropped in the shoulder. And we get her mother, who's like, oh, this is perfect. And then the next season, we go to 20 inches. And the next season, we go to 21 inches. Now, I hate this is going to sound very morbid. Now her mom's gone. Rest in peace. Thoughts and prayers. And now her daughter's there, and she's wearing what we want her to wear. So that's a little bit of managing expectations. It's kind of like giving that historical data of what the customer wants while giving the designer what he or she wants.
Great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you want to explain your vantage for us?
This was my security blanket today. But this is something that I designed for a business, and I think I might have missed that. I have started 2 businesses, one called Francesca Colleen, and this is one of the gowns that I showed for New York Fashion Week during COVID. That was that was fun. And so she was the first, I call her she was the first dress that I designed. I love her. She's a stretch gown, so she can fit from a size 6 all the way up to maybe an 8. I love the 3D floral detailing that I did for this. And I like that she's a little bit sexy, but still, you know.
Bandages coming back in.
What's that?
Bandages coming back in.
Yeah. So, she's not revealing too much, but she looks really, really nice. And so this is from my collection, Francesca Colleen. And I started another company called Port of Spain, which is a print-on-demand business. That one is wild, like all the crazy colors and things that I put on bomber jackets and leggings and things like that. I'm from the Caribbean, and so I have a little bit of, spice in me. I'm from Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. You can't tell, I've lived here all my life. And my accent seems to come out when I go home, so that's why I sound the way I do. Any other questions?
Yeah, so you mentioned when you first got into the role, I think that entry-level role, you ended up working 2 jobs for like half that pay.
Right.
What would you say to like a college student who is walking into any like business role or just any job in general, trying to negotiate that and setting strong boundaries for this is a job I applied for, this is a job that I want to work,
Right.
and not taking on these responsibilities that you either were not prepared for or you were not informed that you were going to take on?
Right. So a lot of jobs will have a little blurb that says, and any other things assigned. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. Ask about that. What other things might be assigned to me? What other things do you foresee that I may have to do that are not listed in this description? When you meet with the team that you meet with, at least in my role, I've always met with a panel of at least 4 to 6 for technical design. I've always met with the merchant. I've always met with the sourcing manager. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. And do research. You guys are so lucky. ChatGPT knows so much stuff. You could ask ChatGPT. My husband talked to ChatGPT this morning. I'm like, how come you didn't ask me that? I could have told you that. You ask ChatGPT, and I'm standing right here. So do a lot of research. Glassdoor has, I wish I had Glassdoor. I will tell you, I was making $25,000 for my first job, and I thought I was rich. I was not rich. I did not know what I was doing, but it's a whole lot better than that now, because when I do my research and I negotiate for a job, I try to make sure that I don't leave any money on the table, none. And I always negotiate my bonus. So ask about bonuses, ask other people who do the work that you do, and do all the research that you can get, and find out what that little blurb of, and any other assignments that we, give to you, yeah.
Well, thank you so much to Lisia. We have a little gift
Oh,
for
thank you. I love gifts.
For your time.
Thank you. Really a pleasure being here today. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.